And I just want to highlight that all knowledge happens in a particular context. That context involves our history, our personal history, our nation's history, our culture, our geography, actually even eschatology. This is all part of the context in which we are knocking on doors. So as the door opens, we are involved in relational dynamics with the people who open the door, with the knowledge that we learn. And in other words, there can be aha moments in our understanding, moments when suddenly it all falls into place and we say, yes, now I've got it. Now I understand. So there were some fascinating examples of this in my life, and I can share one with you. I was tremendously excited to discover in Kilpauk patterns of knowing, patterns that I had encountered in less theological contexts. So let me explain. I did an MTH at SAIACS and a PhD later on the same subject, but from different directions. The first was from below, and the second was from above. So the epistemology that starts from below it looks at the phenomenology of our experience. How do we know? What happens when we know? And it tries to bring that into coherent relationship with the revelation that God has given us in the Bible. And I discovered three important themes. And I began to wonder if those three themes were somehow Trinitarian. But I was thinking, surely that's imagining things. It might be just that I'm imagining Trinitarian because there are three things, and threeness is not proof of Trinitarianness in the slightest. So was I simply reading into what I was seeing, this idea? So in the later study in my PhD, I tackled it the other direction. I began from the Bible and from theology. In particular, I studied the theology of Kilpauk and went towards our experience of knowing. And that's the reverse direction, what's called from above to below. And imagine how my heart glowed when I started to see those same three ideas at work in all sorts of places in Barth's theology. In a sense, that was an aha moment. A door opened for me. That was a way in which suddenly I felt I'd received a gift. And all I can say is that these three themes of asking and seeking and knocking, or in other words, committedness, openness, and relationality. These three ideas have been tremendously exciting for me, and I hope that you will find them exciting too. So after I finished a PhD at SAIACS, then I went home to New Zealand, and my church asked me, the denomination asked me to be the principal of a college, their college called Pathways College in New Zealand. And, you know, that was a privilege, but there was a problem. It had just been amalgamated. Two schools had been dwindling in numbers, and they were having troubles. And then they amalgamated, and I was made the principal a couple of years after the amalgamation. And it was on the verge of closing down. It was residential based, and the churches of my country did not trust this institution anymore. fewer and fewer students were signing up for residential classroom-centered courses. And so after listening to some rather blunt criticism and opinions, I could see that some radical change was going to be necessary if we were going to survive. So I began to ask the question, is learning best offered as knowledge conveyed to receptive minds in classrooms? Maybe that's not the best way for everybody. Yes, I enjoyed learning that way, but a lot of people didn't. And so recognizing the power of contextual learning, of the importance of involvement, a particular place. Everyone is in a particular place in their life, a particular place in their ministry. And so letting the learning connect with that context was an idea. So we restructured the whole college around internship. Now, I know HBI does a lot of learning in practice and in mission trips and these things. So I'm sure the power of context is being harnessed in HBI as well. But my experience in New Zealand was that this dramatically changed the nature of the college. It changed the success of the college. Suddenly, students were wanting to join, churches were wanting to partner, and the numbers have lifted greatly since that time. So knowledge is increasingly impacting or transformative when we involve people in seeking and in asking and in knocking on the doors that they are living next to. So when there is a church they're involved with, help the learning connect to that door. When there's a ministry they're involved with, then help the learning connect to the door that's involved in their activity. So Jesus understood all this way, way back at the beginning, the Sermon on the Mount. Knowing and receiving good gifts comes from asking, seeking, and knowing, knocking, asking, seeking, and knocking. So after 5 years at Pathways College, I ended up being called to SAIACS and took up the role of principalship there. And the experience of contextual learning was powerful in reshaping what we did with the MA at SAIACS. And we built in context-based learning into the MA. And that was just as transformative as it was in New Zealand. So I remember, for instance, we had an African student who was, in her context-based ministry, was connected with a nearby ministry to street people, rather like Mother Teresa at Calcutta. And she shared how she was getting nowhere in talking with these people. They basically put up a wall, they ignored her, and she wasn't winning. Then, after several weeks, she realized she had been looking down on them. And of course, they were feeling that sense of superiority. And when she humbled herself and approached them as an equal, suddenly the barriers broke down. And I was thinking, man alive, if she had only learned stuff in the classroom, she would never have understood the importance of humility for ministry. We've got to learn to ask and seek and knock and allow people to open doors for us. So I hope I've explained my three themes here: asking, seeking, and knowing. You may have similar experiences in life that remind you of ways of learning.
Okay, let me share briefly my experience. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah, it's about, even I can resonate with the research work that you have done. It is also related to my research. And as I was reading the book of Acts, and actually the one thing that caught my attention, the occurrences of the word homothermodon, which means with one accord. So actually I want to do my PhD dissertation on that. I've been wondering, is there any way that I can do, because just a one word, and
Yes.
there will be a question, how can you do this? What is the scope? And is there an expandability of this word? There will be quite a lot of questions. And I've been reading about it, and I've been connecting with many scholars. And finally, and there are two scholars, actually, they said, they encouraged me, no, you have to go about it because nobody have written on it. And people would have done the lexical analysis and people would have done the word study, but you are actually asking the question, what is the significance of it? So that question has not been addressed. So that was the answer that I have gotten from Dr. Steve Walton. And as a gift, as you got a gift from the Paul Hebert, it is just a gift from Dr. Steve Walton. And so that's where I can resonate with asking. And now actually I'm almost finishing.
Right.
Thank you.
So you've done quite a bit of seeking now to fill out the picture of that gift that he gave you. Yeah.
Yep.
Very good. And you have a unique place and context in the world to do that asking, which is the door knocking thing. The way that word opens doors is, in your context, different from anywhere else in the world. So I'm excited. That's good, Johnson. All right, well, we better press on. I want to shift gear now to have a look at something else. So what we've seen so far is how Jesus says we ought to know. And now I want to look at whether or not he follows his own example. Does God know us the same way as he's advising us to know? So is there both an asking and a seeking in God's history of knowing us? And of course, we can't simply ask this of Jesus. If we're talking about God, we're talking about the Trinitarian. That may sound very weird and strange. Don't worry. Let's see where we get to after we explore some difference. Okay, asking and keeping on asking, keep on seeking, keep on knocking. Yeah, we've done that. So, ways of knowing and the religious spectrum. You in India know far better than me in New Zealand that the view out there in the daily life, there is a spectrum. There is a whole range of different options and the way people think that God relates to the world. So ways of knowing have a similar spectrum as the way people talk to each other. I mean, have you ever met someone who talks at you and never listens to you? The people who talk down to you, that perhaps maybe people who shout at you. I'm sure we have. And of course, let's think of them at one side. They're those who tend to dominate others as they talk. At the other end of the spectrum, you have people who hardly listen to you. They ignore everything you say, and they are talking so quietly you can't catch what they're talking about. So you've got a dominating type of person, and you've got a quiet type of person who is so distant, he's just not interested in you at all. So this is rather like the spectrum of world religions. The various religions of the world can be plotted on a diagram. I mean, this is a crazy diagram in the sense that it oversimplifies a lot of things, but I thought it would be a helpful way to talk about things. So what I'm trying to say is that religious cosmologies, the way various religions understand God relating to the world, has this range of differences, and we can look at whether they think the world and God are essentially one on the left-hand side, and whether the reality of the world is not simply oneness, but manyness. So those that emphasize manyness is on the right-hand side. So in the paper, you'll see a couple of short notes about taxonomies of epistemology and stuff. I'll leave that to you to read and go into yourself. I'm simplifying, and so you can understand better if you read the paper. So views about the way God relates to the world range from those that emphasize oneness and those that emphasize manyness.